My son looked me dead in the eyes and said, "A coffin suits you better than a dress." Not in anger, not in a fight. We were in Macy's, fitting room hallway. I'd just stepped out wearing a navy wrap dress. Soft fabric, simple cut, something that made me feel presentable, alive. He didn't even look up from his phone. Just tossed it out like lint. And Jenna, his wife, giggled. "It's just a joke, Dot. Lighten up." But imagine your own child saying that while you're still holding a photo of him at 5 years old. His frosting-smeared smile. The little boy who used to run into my arms and ask if angels had wings like me. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I just stared at them, and in that silence, I felt it. Not pain. Not even shock. Clarity. Like someone finally wiped the fog off the mirror I'd been staring into for 20 years. That night, I packed before sunrise. Quietly. Deliberate. I canceled the joint cards, froze the safety net, left behind the garage opener and a sealed envelope. Matthew wouldn't open it right away. He never opens anything unless it benefits him, but when he did, he'd find something that would shake him more than any argument ever could. Because inside that envelope was proof, not just of his betrayal, but of mine. I'd betrayed myself. Every time I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. Every time I smiled when Jenna cut me off at dinner. Every time I paid their mortgage, thinking it meant I still mattered. Well, that version of me died the second he said I looked better buried than dressed. I didn't call a friend. I didn't ask for a ride. I called a cab and gave the driver an address I hadn't said out loud in 22 years. My maiden name was still on the mailbox. We pulled away just as the sky started bleeding orange. He didn't know I was gone yet, but when he did, he'd check the accounts, try to use the cards, try to call, and then he'd know. I didn't just leave, I left with the receipts, and I wasn't coming back. I left at 5:42 a.m., not because I had to, but because I knew that's when Jenna did her gratitude meditation with her headphones in. It gave me a 10-minute head start before the silence cracked. I moved through that house like a ghost, the same one I'd helped them buy, same granite countertops I picked, same kitchen I'd baked Matthew's birthday cakes in, until Jenna decided store-bought was less stressful. My suitcase rolled quieter than I expected. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I just left the envelope on the hall table, right where their keys used to be, before I stopped being trusted to drive. Inside that envelope, proof that every dollar I gave was tracked, every gift labeled, every favor documented. I kept the spreadsheets. Every payment labeled Mom for groceries that magically turned into caregiver services on their taxes. Every transfer from my account that Matthew disguised as elder support in his hardship loan request. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the lie buried under all of it. Because 2 years ago, he'd asked me to co-sign a form for his refinance, said it was just a formality. I signed. I trusted. Turns out, that form made me legally responsible for his mortgage, $344,000 in liability tied to my name. And guess what? He was behind on payments. He'd filed paperwork with the bank saying I was a dependent, that I had dementia, that I required full-time care. He was trying to paint me as a burden. On paper, he'd already buried me. And the only reason I knew? A stranger showed up at the hospital to pick me up the day I got discharged from gallbladder surgery. His name was Robert Hamilton, bank regional manager. Not my cab driver, not a relative, but somehow he knew more about my financial situation than I did. "I think your son's been misusing your signature, Mrs. Parker," he said, helping me into his Toyota like I was royalty. And right there, with my stitches still sore and my dignity in shreds, I realized Matthew hadn't just failed me as a son. He'd weaponized my trust. I didn't feel pain. I felt something colder, older, righteous. Now, I wasn't just a mother walking away. I was a co-signer with a ledger. And Robert? He wasn't just a bank manager. He was the boy I once promised to marry, before my father made sure that never happened. Robert drove in silence while the hospital faded behind us. Not a word, just the quiet hum of the road and the seatbelt tight across my chest. He hadn't changed much. Still that calm presence, still those hands. Strong, but kind. Finally, he asked, "Do you have any documentation?" I didn't answer right away. I reached into my bag and handed him the folder. Cream-colored, worn. He opened it at a red light. Check stubs, wire transfers, statements, dates, notes. My handwriting. "I've been documenting everything since 2021, I said. "When they started borrowing money they didn't return. When the quick favors became automatic withdrawals. When I got a 2 a.m. bank alert for a home healthcare service I never received. Flash cuts, 15 seconds max. Me staring at a lasagna no one touched. A birthday call that never came. Jenna's voice. It's easier if Matthew handles your banking." My hands quietly logging transactions into a ledger, my eyes wide open in the dark. Back to present. Robert turned the page, slower now. "You've got proof of payments from you to them," he said, "but he told the bank they were payments to you, for care services." I nodded. "He's setting up a full-time dependent. Me." I looked out the window. "They're writing my obituary while I'm still doing my own laundry." Robert gripped the wheel tighter. Then he whispered the kind of sentence that rearranges your bloodstream. "He's crossed a federal line." "What do you mean?" "He used your medical information to file for mortgage relief, falsified your health records, claimed you were incompetent, that you had dementia, that you required round-the-clock care." My heart stopped. "They forged that?" Robert pulled into a quiet park and turned off the engine. "They didn't just lie, Dot. They built a file around you, invented a disability, used it to justify missed payments, and made you the scapegoat. If the house forecloses, you go down with it. You co-signed." I stared out at the trees. Same trees we used to walk past in 1979. And suddenly, I laughed. Short, breathless. "That's funny." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Just the boy who used to beg me for cookies is now trying to kill me with paperwork. That's not petty. That's professional." He closed the folder gently. "So what do we do?" I turned to him, steel in my spine. It should have been a simple question. "I'm 67. I've had surgery last week. My son's accused me of being mentally unfit and forged medical records to make me his personal excuse for financial ruin. I should have said, 'I just want peace.' But I didn't. Instead, I heard myself say, 'I want my name off that mortgage. I want his lies on paper next to my proof. And I want control back. Not over him, over myself.'" Robert turned off the car's engine and looked over at me. "That's a lot." "No," I said, "that's the bare minimum." He nodded, slowly. Then I laid it out like a project plan, because that's how my brain works. Always has. Step 1, freeze his access to anything involving my name. Step 2, notify the mortgage division about suspected fraud. Step 3, verify the documents he submitted and prove they were fabricated. Step 4, reclaim legal standing over any asset or obligation I never consented to. I stared out the windshield. It's not about money. Robert was quiet, letting me talk. It's about my name, my signature, my story. He took those like they belonged to him, and now I want them back. He gave a small smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "You sound like the girl I used to know." "I never stopped being her," I said. "I just got tired." Then I looked him in the eye. "But not anymore." He reached into the back seat and pulled out a worn leather briefcase. "What's that?" "A favor," he said, unzipping it. "Old contact of mine at the fraud unit. He's discreet. You'll need someone officially legal on this, a lawyer, and I know someone who owes me." "Good?" "Ruthless, in a very polite, expensively educated way." He handed me a business card. Jennifer Chen, Esquire, Federal Elder and Property Law. Clean serif font, no slogan, just wait. "You said you wanted to expose the forgery?" he said. I nodded. Robert looked at me, steady. "Then let's give him what he's pretending to have. An incompetent mother who shows up with a lawyer." 2 days later, I found it. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just sorting through a box Jenna had dumped in a rush when I left. You know, the "we thought you might want these" pile. A mix of expired coupons, old birthday cards, and half-used notebooks I'd kept in the kitchen drawer. That's when I saw it. A crumpled, dry cleaning receipt. Nothing special at first glance, except it was stapled to a notary record. My hand stopped moving. I smoothed the paper on the kitchen table of the small apartment Robert had helped me rent. Just temporary, he'd said, until things were properly reversed. I liked that phrasing. The receipt was for a men's suit jacket, Matthew's size, from 6 months ago. On the back, scribbled in Jenna's handwriting, "Ask Paul to notarize the papers wed." No last name, no business address, just a stamp number. Ink had bled slightly, smudged along the corner. I ran my thumb across it. That tactile feeling, ink on cheap thermal paper, hit a nerve. Because I remembered the day Matthew picked up that suit. He said he had a meeting with the bank and that he needed to look like someone who could handle adult things. I remember laughing. God help me, I laughed. And I paid for the damn suit. Now I stared at the receipt and wondered if I'd just found the trail. I called Robert. He answered on the first ring. "Find something?" "Not much, just a receipt, with a notary stamp number." I heard him exhale, the kind of quiet whistle people make when they're impressed and worried at the same time. "Can you send me a photo?" I did. 10 minutes later, he called back. "Dot, the notary stamp belongs to a man named Paul Nguyen. He's been reported before. Allegations of notarizing signatures without the signee present. So he's not a real notary?" "He's a real notary. He's just got a habit of looking the other way. And according to his record, he recently notarized documents for a Michael Parker on behalf of a family member suffering from advanced cognitive decline." I said nothing for a long time. Then, "Does it say where he works?" "Yes, and we have an appointment at noon tomorrow." I looked at the receipt again. So casual, so sloppy. It wouldn't be the smoking gun, not yet, but it was the first crack in his story, and I'd learned long ago. When structures fall, they don't shatter all at once, they crumble. From the edges first. The office was in a strip mall, between a payday loan place and a vape shop. The kind of place you wouldn't glance at twice, unless you were looking for shortcuts and didn't care who got hurt. Paul Nguyen, Notary Public. The plastic sign on the glass door was curling at the corners. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s. Hair buzzed short, shirt buttoned too high like he was trying too hard to look professional. Robert introduced us with the bland ease of a bank manager who'd handled 1,000 small claims and a few big ones. He handed Paul a slim folder. No threats, no warnings, just the facts. Paul flipped through the documents, his eyes narrowed. "This was notarized under duress," Robert said evenly. "We're here to confirm whether you witnessed the signature personally." Paul didn't answer, just tapped his pen on the desk. Then I spoke. "Do you remember seeing me sign those? In person?" I leaned forward, my voice calm. Because if I had dementia, like the paperwork says, how could I legally consent to anything? That got him. His hand froze mid-tap. A flicker of panic crossed his face. I don't recall exactly. There were a lot of clients that week." Robert didn't blink. "You notarized 4 documents that day. All from Michael Parker. 3 of them used his mother's name. This woman right here." Paul looked like he might throw up. I watched him squirm for another beat before I said what I came to say. "See, I remember exactly where I was that day. Physical therapy, 10:15 a.m. public place. Signed in, 2 witnesses, and 0 documents in front of me." Paul swallowed hard. "I didn't know. He said she was too ill to travel." "And you didn't verify that?" I asked. Robert's voice turned cold. "He didn't even use gloves." Paul blinked. "What?" "You notarized fraud. Sloppy fraud. He used the same signature cutout 3 times. You didn't even notice." The room went still. I watched the sweat bead near Paul's hairline and realized something sharp. Matthew didn't think he needed to be careful. He thought I'd never fight, never notice, never remember. And Paul? He thought nobody would care enough to check. I stood slowly and picked up the dry cleaning receipt from the folder. "This," I said, tapping it with my nail, is going to be your first exhibit in a very interesting case file." Paul's voice was barely audible. "What do you want from me?" Robert stood beside me. "We want a statement," he said, "signed, dated, and honest." I looked the notary in the eye. "And if you lie again, Paul?" "I'll remember, because unlike my son, I don't forget who signs what." It came by mail, a plain manila envelope slid under the door of my apartment. No knock, no return address, just my name in typed block letters. I opened it, expecting junk mail. What I got felt like a punch to the sternum. Petition for guardianship filed by Michael Parker Reason. Deteriorating cognitive function. Suspected early-stage dementia. Inability to manage personal and financial affairs. He'd put it in writing. I sank into the kitchen chair and stared at the words. Medical exhibits. Attached statements. A diagnosis from a doctor I'd never met. According to the petition, I'd had multiple falls, memory lapses, an episode of wandering without orientation, all lies, but typed, stamped, filed. It was dated 3 days after I left his house. This wasn't spontaneous. He'd planned this. He'd expected resistance. He was trying to legally erase me before I could fight back. I looked at the supporting documents. One was a typed statement from Jenna. Dot often forgets conversations. She once left the stove on for 2 hours. We've had to redirect her several times when she became confused about where she was. Redirect me? The only thing I'd needed redirecting from was their fake kindness. And then, the worst part, a signed letter from a Dr. Raymond Keller listing me as mentally unfit for self-management due to cognitive decline consistent with early Alzheimer's. I'd never met the man, not once. The pages shook in my hands. I wasn't afraid. Not exactly. I was something deeper, something colder. They wanted legal proof that I was already dead. That's when Robert walked in, holding 2 coffees. I didn't say anything. I just slid the papers across the table. He flipped through them. His jaw tightened. "They filed this without a hearing?" "Expedited request. They're trying to fast-track guardianship while I'm still recovering from surgery." He sat across from me, placed a hand over mine. "This is their power grab," he said. "They want control over everything tied to your name." I looked at the forged medical statement again. "He even faked a doctor." Robert leaned forward. "Then we prove it. We subpoena the notary, we request medical verification, and we catch him in his own net." I stared at the table, but my vision had narrowed to one thought. He was trying to have me declared legally incompetent, and he almost pulled it off. Almost. But now I wasn't just defending myself. I was building a case, and when it was done, he wouldn't just lose control. He'd lose every lie he ever built his life on. Robert didn't waste time. The next morning, we met James, an auditor with eyes like a bloodhound and the conversational charm of a calculator. Perfect. He wore a simple gray sweater, no tie, no small talk. He greeted me with a nod and a legal pad. "I reviewed the bank activity," he said, clicking his pen. "Now we're going to dismantle his story, line by line." It felt good. Cold, focused, like finally switching from defense to offense. We started with the forged medical payments, the ones Matthew claimed were for my assisted living needs. James held up one bank statement with 3 highlighted entries: $850, grocery store $600, Jenna's salon $2,100, Disney vacation deposit. All of this, he said, tapping the paper, is categorized under medical expenses in his hardship application. I raised an eyebrow. "So Mickey Mouse is now a caregiver?" Robert smirked. James didn't. Then he flipped the page. "These wire transfers," he continued, "are labeled as monthly support payments to dependent parent. But all the deposits are coming from you into his account, not the other way around." He slid the paper toward me. "These timestamps destroy his timeline." I nodded. "Then we destroy his story." We kept going. Check copies. Transaction logs, emails Jenna forwarded me as a courtesy that now functioned as admission. Photos of me attending a yoga class the same week Matthew claimed I couldn't walk without help. Every time James found another inconsistency, he'd hum softly, the kind of sound you make when a puzzle piece fits exactly where it's supposed to. After an hour, he sat back, satisfied. There's enough here to challenge the guardianship and open a fraud investigation. Civil, possibly criminal. I felt the words land. Not maybe. Not if. Enough. I looked at Robert. He gave a single nod. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. And I damn sure wasn't incompetent. I'd been documenting, watching, enduring. And now? Now I was fighting. I folded my hands neatly over the pile of evidence and said, "How do we file the challenge?" James opened his laptop. Already started. I looked down at the pages, the receipts, the digital trails, all the little things they thought I'd forget. It's funny how truth looks like clutter to a liar until you put it in order. And once it's in order, it clicks louder than any lie ever could. I found it on a flash drive labeled Tax 2022, tucked in the corner of a blue folder Robert had pulled from one of the banker boxes I'd saved from the old house. I wouldn't have noticed it, except the file wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a Word doc, draft willparker.docx. My breath caught. I double-clicked. The formatting was casual. No headers, no lawyer letterhead, no notary signature. Just plain text. Maybe he hadn't expected anyone to see it yet. Or maybe he thought I wouldn't know what I was looking at. But I did. The first 2 lines stopped me cold. In the event of my mother's incapacitation or death, all jointly held assets, including the home, remaining retirement accounts, and vehicles, shall be transferred to EP Family Management, LLC. I froze. EP Family Management. I'd seen that name before, on a memo Jenna printed and left in the printer tray last fall. I thought it was her cousin's business. It wasn't. It was hers. And Matthew's. A private holding account they'd set up 2 years ago. They weren't just trying to sideline me. They were trying to funnel everything through a shell company and disappear me in the process. There wasn't a single mention of my name, not one line affirming my contributions, my ownership, my rights. Just cold language about transfers, non-revocable clauses, and removal of legacy liabilities. Legacy liabilities. That was me. I wasn't even a person in this file. I was a liability. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet. No music, no clock ticking, just the low hum of the fan and the sharp sting of paper cutting the side of my finger when I moved to close the folder. Blood welled up instantly, a small drop on the printed draft. It looked like punctuation, a period right after the word void. I stared at it for a long time. He'd planned my erasure. In writing, digitally backed up, filed in the same folder where I used to store photos of him learning to ride a bike. The pain wasn't loud. It was precise, like a needle through fabric. Tiny, accurate, permanent. I called Robert. His voice was clipped when I told him. "Send it," he said. "Immediately." "I already did." He paused. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But I'm awake." Because this wasn't about proving I was alive anymore. This was about proving they'd already buried me. And I was clawing my way back, one signature at a time. The motel smelled like bleach and old cigarette smoke. I didn't care. It had a lock that worked and a bed that didn't talk back. I stood in front of the mirror, towel wrapped around me, watching the steam rise from the sink. The light above flickered, just enough to be irritating. I didn't fix it. I was too tired to pretend I wasn't tired. I'd been staying there for 3 nights. Robert offered his guest room. I said no. I didn't want to be someone's project. I didn't want anyone watching me fall asleep with the TV on just to block out the silence. I hadn't told anyone about the will, not yet. I kept hearing that one line in my head, in the event of my mother's incapacitation or death, as if both outcomes were the same. As if there was no difference between me forgetting who I was and me being in the ground. That kind of thinking, it doesn't come from a stranger. It comes from someone who used to call you mommy. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the blanket around my shoulders. My body still ached from the surgery. Not the incision that was healing. It was everything else that felt bruised, like grief had made a home in my muscles. I opened my phone, stared at his name in my contacts. Matthew. No emoji, no nickname, just plain. I hovered my thumb over the delete button. Didn't press it, not yet, because this wasn't over. But God, it would have been easier to just disappear, to go quietly into whatever version of the story they wanted to tell. That's what they counted on. That I'd be too humiliated, too ashamed, too tired. And for a moment, alone in that cheap motel with a flickering light and no one calling to ask if I was okay, I almost understood why people give up. But then I remembered the sound of Jenna's laugh in Macy's when he said I looked better in a coffin. That sound has stayed with me, not because it hurt, because it confirmed everything. They didn't see me as a person anymore, just an obstacle. So I got up, turned off the light, and whispered one question into the dark. What do you do when your own blood becomes your executioner? You survive. Then you sue. Jennifer Chen arrived, just like Robert promised. Clean suit. No nonsense. The kind of woman who doesn't knock twice. I remembered her name from the card he gave me that day in the park, right after I said, "We show up with a lawyer." Well, here she was. She walked into Robert's office in a slate gray suit, hair pinned back so tight it looked like it could cut glass. No jewelry, no perfume. Just a leather portfolio and eyes that saw through nonsense like it was fog on a windshield. She flipped through the documents in silence. The forged notary page, the guardianship filing, the financial audit, the draft will. When she got to the part about the LLC, she muttered under her breath, "Rookie mistake." Then she looked up at me. "You documented all of this yourself?" I nodded. Her lips curled. Not quite a smile. 30 years in corporate ops, right? "I documented oxygen," I said. Robert chuckled. Jennifer didn't. She just tapped the side of her temple. "Good? Because people like your son, they count on you folding quietly. They prey on shame." Then she opened her folder. "Let's weaponize facts." Within 48 hours, she had filed a motion to contest the guardianship. Emergency injunction. Subpoena requests for the fake doctor, the notary, and financial records tied to the LLC. "I don't like half measures," she said. "We're going after the whole machine." That afternoon, we drafted an invitation. Simple subject line, family meeting, estate planning update, sent from my email. Addressed to Matthew and Jenna. Time, date, and location, Robert's bank conference room. Robert raised an eyebrow. "You think he'll come?" Jennifer didn't even look up. "He wants the assets. He thinks you're cornered. He'll walk right into it." I stared at the screen. The words felt fake. Estate planning, as if I was still part of the estate, as if I hadn't already been erased from it in draft form. But I hit send, and within 15 minutes, I got a reply. "Great. Jenna and I will be there. Let's keep it civil." I didn't reply. Instead, I sat in that quiet office, watching Jennifer build a case like someone loading bullets into a revolver, one document at a time. At one point, she looked at me and said, "Smile." I blinked. "Why?" She leaned forward. "Because the best part of a trap is letting the rat think it's a dinner invitation." And just like that, I felt it. Power. Real, legal, tactical power. Not rage, not desperation. Control. The clock was ticking, and for once, it was ticking for him. The bank's conference room was cold, not emotionally, physically. Fluorescent lights, polished table, 6 black chairs, one too many. I sat at the end. Jennifer sat on my right, Robert on my left. They weren't there to comfort me. They were there to witness. The door opened. Matthew walked in with Jenna behind him. Both dressed like this was a job interview or a funeral. Maybe both. He didn't look at me, didn't even pause. Just shook Robert's hand like he was still charming, still the boy who could talk his way out of anything with that used car smile. Then he sat. "So," he said, spreading his hands wide. "Mom wanted to meet about estate planning?" Jennifer didn't speak. Not yet. I leaned forward, my voice low. "Please, continue." He blinked, caught off guard, just for a second. Then, "Right. Well, Jenna and I talked about putting a plan together for the future. You know, just in case anything happens or your condition changes. Jennifer opened her folder. Click. Sound of paper sliding. You mean this condition? She asked, holding up the guardianship petition. The one where you claim your mother has cognitive decline, memory loss, and can't live independently? Matthew went pale. That was submitted on advice, legal advice. We were concerned. Jennifer cut him off. Calm. Precise. We've already contacted the doctor listed in the affidavit. He has no record of ever examining or speaking to Miss Parker. Silence. Jenna shifted in her chair, recrossed her legs, said nothing. Further, Jennifer continued, flipping the next page, we've retrieved bank records and notary statements, including one notarized by a Mr. Paul Nguyen, who has now signed a legal declaration stating he never witnessed Ms. Parker's signature in person. That's forgery. Matthew laughed, too loud. Okay, wow, this is a lot. Mom, what is this? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Jennifer pressed a small remote. A screen behind her lit up. Image, the draft will, the clause about the LLC, the phrase, legacy liabilities. Recognize this? She asked. Matthew's mouth opened, then shut. For the first time, I noticed how small he looked in that chair. Not young, just diminished, like the room had grown around him and left him behind. He looked at me. Mom, please. I stared at him, said nothing. The hum of the AC filled the silence. No yelling, no scene, just facts, one after the other, piling into the room like cold wind. And this time, I didn't flinch. Jennifer didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She laid each document on the table like a dealer in a high-stakes card game, and Matthew knew he'd brought Uno cards to a poker table. Let's walk through it, she said crisp. One document, one fraud. Exhibit A, the notarized guardianship petition. Signed without the signee present, Jennifer said. Confirmed by the notary. Matthew shifted in his seat. I didn't know. Jennifer ignored him. Exhibit B, the falsified doctor's letter. The signature doesn't match verified samples from Dr. Keller's office, and the letterhead used hasn't been in circulation since 2018. She slid the paper forward. Matthew didn't touch it. Exhibit C, 3 months of bank statements. Jennifer highlighted each transfer I had made and how he labeled them as caregiver income to qualify for hardship programs. Here's the Disney payment, she said flatly, tapping a line on the statement. Filed as home health care support expense. Jenna flinched. Exhibit D, the dry cleaning receipt with the handwritten note. Proof of intent, Jennifer said. You knew you'd be notarizing documents in advance. You planned it. I didn't, Matthew started. Jennifer flipped the final page. Exhibit E, the draft will. The nail, she said. This document outlines your plan to transfer all of Ms. Parker's assets into a shell company you and your wife control, without her knowledge, while claiming she's mentally unfit. She sat back, let it settle. Each paper stripped him down, layer by layer. I would later say to Robert. In the room, I said nothing. I didn't need to. I watched as Matthew's face collapsed in on itself. Rage trying to morph into innocence, shame into denial. He looked at Jenna. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Jennifer gave them 10 seconds of silence. A mercy. Then, at this point, Ms. Parker has grounds for civil litigation, fraud charges, elder abuse claims, and a full financial audit. Matthew looked at me again. His voice cracked. Mom, I didn't mean to. Jennifer cut him off, voice colder now. She doesn't have to accept an apology. She doesn't even have to acknowledge your excuses. She gave you 30 years. You gave her a forged obituary. The room fell quiet again, and I could feel it in my chest, like air returning to lungs that hadn't fully worked in weeks. This wasn't just evidence. It was an exorcism. Jennifer pulled out the final document, a motion to freeze joint accounts pending fraud review. It only needed one signature, mine. She slid the paper in front of me, along with a sleek black pen, the kind of pen people use to finalize mortgages, divorces, and very clean endings. I didn't hesitate. Click. Ink on paper. My name, in full. No initials, no abbreviations. Dorothy Elaine Parker, done. Jennifer collected the motion without fanfare and handed it to Robert, who walked it straight to the internal bank processing unit. It would be flagged, logged, and delivered to a judge by end of day. Matthew still hadn't spoken. He looked smaller now, like someone trying to shrink out of his own skin. His hands twitched on the table, restless and useless. Then he finally said it. One word. Mom. His voice broke on the vowel like it physically hurt him to say it. I looked at him, and I said nothing, because this wasn't his moment. This wasn't the part where he gets a monologue or redemption or a convenient sob story about pressure and debt and family dynamics. He had his chance to speak. Instead, he forged mine. The silence between us was not empty. It was full of every receipt, every sleepless night, every "I'm just helping" lie he fed me until I swallowed them like pills. So I stared at him, calm, steady. And that silence, for once, it favored me. He looked at Jenna. She looked at the door. Jennifer began packing the documents. Robert returned and gave me a short nod. All accounts under review, spending halted, house flagged for disputed ownership. I exhaled. Not dramatically, not like in the movies. Just slowly. The kind of breath you release when your name finally feels like it belongs to you again. Jennifer stood. We're done here. Matthew stayed seated, maybe waiting for the moment to rewind itself. It didn't. I walked out without looking back. Not to be dramatic, not to hurt him, but because he was no longer in my rear view. He was behind something bigger now, a legal system that still worked when you had the strength and the documents to make it listen. It didn't take long. 2 days after the freeze order hit, I got a call from a local reporter. She'd come across my name while researching elder financial abuse cases. I didn't answer. But that same day, Matthew's name started trending. Not viral, not dramatic, just enough to make people start whispering. A neighborhood Facebook group posted, "Anyone else hear about what Matthew Parker did to his own mom? Sickening." Jenna's salon stopped tagging her in photos. Then they quietly removed her from their team page. Church friends, the same ones who'd nodded along when Jenna called me too fragile to attend services, sent long texts. Not apologies, just confusion, dressed up as concern. We had no idea it had gotten that bad. Hope you're okay. Praying for healing. Healing from what? The surgery? The lies? Or the fact that they believed him without asking me? I didn't respond to most of them. Sometimes, people don't side with abusers because they're evil. They just prefer a neat story. And mine had been messy. Too old, too emotional, too. Maybe there's truth on both sides. Well, not anymore. Jennifer's legal motion had triggered a review on the guardianship request, and that hearing would be public. Robert told me the courthouse would issue a release summary once the documents were reviewed. I didn't care about the paperwork, but I cared deeply about this. My silence had been used against me for years. Now it was their turn to be silent. And watched. The courthouse smelled like old books and coffee left too long on the burner. I sat at the petitioner's table with Jennifer beside me. Her posture was flawless. Her expression, unreadable. Matthew sat across the aisle. No Jenna this time. He wore a navy suit that didn't quite fit. Too stiff at the shoulders, like it belonged to someone with integrity. He kept adjusting his tie, kept glancing toward me. I didn't look back. The judge, a woman in her 60s with short silver hair and glasses perched on the tip of her nose, shuffled through the file Jennifer had submitted. Quiet, intentional. Every page turned with weight. When she finally spoke, her voice filled the room without needing to rise. Based on the submitted evidence, including verified financial records, forged documents, and sworn affidavits, the court finds no basis for a guardianship over Ms. Dorothy Parker. No emotion, just law. Furthermore, she continued, this court acknowledges that Ms. Parker has been the target of sustained financial manipulation and attempted legal incapacitation by the petitioner. She paused, looked directly at Matthew. What you attempted, Mr. Parker, falls under the scope of elder fraud. You are fortunate criminal charges have not yet been filed." Jennifer didn't flinch. Neither did I. We weren't there for spectacle. We were there for restoration. The judge turned back to me. "Mrs. Clark, you'll retain full legal and financial control of your affairs, effective immediately. The house, accounts, and all associated holdings will revert to your sole name pending documentation updates." I nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." It wasn't triumph I felt. It was something deeper, the quiet kind of justice that doesn't need to be cheered. Matthew didn't speak, didn't apologize, didn't cry. He just looked at the floor like it might offer him a version of the truth he could live with. There wasn't one. I left the courtroom without turning around. Jennifer caught up with me outside, handed me a stamped packet. "Certified copies?" she said. "It's official." I took them in both hands, the weight surprisingly light. "What now?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Now? You go home, to your house, under your name." I nodded, felt the breeze lift the edge of the court documents in my grip. Control. Not revenge, not retribution. Control. What he stole, I reclaimed, with paper and patience. And no one could take it from me again. It didn't end in a courtroom. It ended right where it started, at the same bank Matthew once tried to weaponize against me. But this time, he wasn't walking in with power. He was being walked out, in cuffs. I didn't plan to be there. Jennifer had wrapped everything up, and I told myself I didn't need to see the final nail go in. But Robert called me that morning. "You may want to come down here," he said. "It's happening." So I did. I stood just outside the revolving doors, watching as 2 federal agents, sharp suits, no smiles, escorted Matthew past a stunned row of tellers and junior managers. The same ones who'd once nodded sympathetically when he said I was struggling mentally. Now? They looked at me like I was carved from steel. One of them, young, maybe 30, stepped toward me as the glass doors whooshed shut behind the agents. "Miss Parker?" he said, like I might not answer. I nodded. "We just wanted to say we were wrong about you." I tilted my head. "You weren't wrong. You just didn't ask the right questions," he flushed. Then he added, quietly, "Honestly, ma'am, you're kind of a legend around here now." I said nothing, just walked past him, steady. Inside, the arrest had left a quiet quake. Jenna was nowhere in sight, because she'd already left him 2 days earlier, when the judge froze their LLC accounts, took the car, the kids, and, according to Robert, the cash from their retirement planning fund. She didn't even leave a note. Just a forwarding address and a silent message. I was here for the money, not the consequences. That afternoon, I walked my street again for the first time in months. The Parker house, my house, looked smaller than I remembered. A neighbor I hadn't spoken to since Christmas came across the yard. Her eyes were wide, careful. "We heard everything. We just didn't know how to help." I shrugged. "You didn't need to help, just not help them." More followed. Quiet apologies, warm casseroles, guilt in Tupperware form. It wasn't forgiveness I felt. It was confirmation, because shame had changed direction now. It followed Matthew like a shadow with a megaphone. The man who tried to silence me with forged documents and false diagnoses was now a punchline, a headline, a warning, a case study. And me, I was home. Not quietly, not humbly, not even gracefully, but undeniably. The deed was in my name again by Tuesday. The house, the car, the retirement account, all retitled. No more joint custodianship. No more hidden signatures. I signed every line with the same pen I used to take Matthew down. Robert notarized each one himself. Jennifer mailed certified copies, same day, clean, legal, irrevocable. By Friday, I hosted a small event at the house. Nothing grand, just enough to let the community walk through the front door of the place they once whispered about, potluck style, folding chairs, real silverware. I stood in the center of the living room, same spot Matthew told me a coffin suited me better than a dress. Well, I wore the same damn dress, pressed, tailored with a brooch I hadn't worn in years. And this time, people told me I looked radiant. A woman from church grabbed my hand and said, "You don't just look strong, you look free." I just smiled. Let them admire it. Let them take pictures if they wanted. Let them remember what power looked like when it showed up as a woman over 60 who refused to disappear.